We've talked about all the fighter subclasses, but now it's time to rank them. Where do all the fighter subclasses stack up against each other? If you want more information on why each subclass is placed where it is, all the subclass videos are linked in the description below. But now, let's begin. First up, we have the Arcane Archer, the worst of the fighter subclasses. Why is this subclass so bad? Well, you have so few arcane shots. Only 2 per rest, and you can only use 1 per turn. I struggle to accurately describe just how terrible it feels to play this subclass in-game, because the arcane shots themselves are so fun and interesting to use. You're tempted by greatness just to be shot down. Most of the time, when you're playing an Arcane Archer, it's like you don't even have a subclass. Which is a shame, because with just a few changes that I talked about in my Arcane Archer video, this subclass becomes a blast to play. The core mechanics of your arcane shots are fun and interesting. It's just that you don't get to use your arcane shots. This is the perfect example of a great idea meeting poor design. Easily a D tier subclass and the worst of all fighter subclasses. But now we can completely switch gears and talk about the Battle Master, which is a joy to play and to DM for. I think maneuvers and superiority dice are some of the best subclass features that the fighter has ever gotten. The mechanics have a lot of depth without a ton of mechanical complexity, yet the Battle Master still rewards tactical thinking. Players that love strategizing on their turns and pulling off these grand combos will love this subclass. And part of this ranking is not just about how powerful a subclass is, but what does it feel like to play a subclass in-game? This is why I've never really understood things like Soarlock blast builds, because sure, you'll do a lot of damage, but after 6 months of just firing Eldritch Blast after Eldritch Blast, it gets boring. The Battle Master is a powerful subclass that constantly stays fresh, exciting, and tactically relevant. You're constantly getting new maneuvers or having the chance to swap out old ones. Plus, since the maneuvers are so versatile in and some outside of combat, you never fall into a rut as a Battle Master. And since variety is the spice of life, I gotta give the Battle Master S tier. Next up though, the Cavalier, and this is a super underrated subclass. Not a lot of players realize that it is an incredible tank. When you're playing a Cavalier, you quickly become a party favorite. You draw attention toward yourself and give your healers something to target. And also, if enemies do eventually get by you, you can defend your other party members. Multiclass a Cavalier with an Ancestral Guardian Barbarian and you have undoubtedly one of the best tanks in all of D&D 5th edition. But even standing on its own, a Cavalier is a great addition. My only real complaint is that I wish it had a summonable mount. Because if your DM isn't on point with making sure you have a mount to actually use your mounted features for your Cavalier, or you don't have a way to get back a mount that has died, sometimes you can just feel the mounted combat aspect of a Cavalier completely leave. But otherwise, it's an incredibly solid subclass. A tier. Following the Cavalier though, we have the Champion, and this is the basic fighter subclass. It is just your milquetoast fighter. Is it strong? Not really, but it doesn't have to be. New players are just trying to learn the basics of the game and don't really care about the strength of a subclass. And the Champion is perfect for those people. Or you encounter players that don't want a sheet full of abilities and options. They want a simple, straightforward character where they don't need to think a lot. I always shake my head when people suggest the Battlemaster fighter or the Samurai or any other fighter subclass as an alternative to the Champion for a new player, because you're kind of missing the point. It is for a person that wants simplicity and does not want to have to think. And you know what? The Champion fighter just might not be for you, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean that the Champion shouldn't be recommended, nor, for lack of a better word, championed. But it is a simple subclass, and therefore not as powerful. Maybe this is contentious, but I think the Champion should be the floor for the fighter class. Think about it like this: if you choose a subclass that requires more from you as a player, you would expect to be rewarded with more powerful features and abilities. So the Champion being better than another subclass is a red flag. I'm looking at you, Arcane Archer. So if you increase the power of the Champion, you've also got to increase the power of all the other fighter subclasses. Or at least all the other fighter subclasses that the Champion has become better than. Now, in my own home games, I use a fighter subclass that I created called the Vanquisher instead of the Champion. It's a bit more powerful and focuses on achieving critical hits, which is something that I really would have liked the Champion fighter to focus on. So that video should be out soon, but for right now, talking about the Champion, I have it as the bottom of C. And you know what? I'm completely okay with the Champion staying there. Let it be the basic starting point from which all other fighter subclasses spawn. And next up, we'll get back to you, Echo Knight, but hey, if you've liked this series, consider subscribing. It takes a second and it really helps a small channel like myself reach more viewers. Literally, one of the best things you can do if you've enjoyed my content at all is hitting that subscribe button. Next up though, the Eldritch Knight. Spellcasting with a fighter is powerful, however, when we look at the Eldritch Knight as a whole, it really is a letdown. This is because the Eldritch Knight offers nothing different or better than multiclassing into another spellcasting class. Look at the Arcane Trickster Rogue. Immediately upon picking up this subclass, you get a huge buff to your mage hand. Your mage hand, which is going to be one of the primary things you're going to be wanting to use as a rogue. It offers something unique that isn't provided by any other class or subclass. And each subsequent ability provides an extra layer of uniqueness and functionality that gives you reasons to choose the Arcane Trickster over multiclassing. So we go from that, a great example in adding spellcasting to a class that doesn't originally have it, to the Eldritch Knight. The Eldritch Knight really doesn't give you any reasons to choose it over multiclassing. Let's say you take all defensive spells with the Eldritch Knight, while you still have worse defensive capabilities than at least a third of the other fighter subclasses, maybe half the other fighter subclasses, and your offense is worse than almost every other fighter, and likewise with utility. Okay then, what if we take only offensive spells? Well, our save DCs and our spellcasting ability scores just aren't high enough. Or if they are, we're cutting down on our ability to be an effective frontline fighter. Okay, but what if we want to be a utility-focused Eldritch Knight? Well, that's not really possible, since you have to choose from Abjuration and Evocation at 3rd level. You can only pick up one utility spell. But I think the most damning thing of all is if we look at a simple Fighter 2 Wizard 1 multiclass. You basically get everything you have with an Eldritch Knight, with free pick of your spells minus a weapon bond. But at 4th level, you choose either a Fighter or Wizard subclass. And look me in the eyes and tell me that an Eldritch Knight is better at anything compared to a 4th level Psi Warrior Wizard multiclass. Or an Echo Knight Wizard multiclass, perhaps a War Wizard, Chronology Wizard, Abjuration Wizard multiclass. There is just no way to justify an Eldritch Knight compared to the litany of other multiclassing options. Except for a game where multiclassing is banned or you have a new player that doesn't want to multiclass. But otherwise, at all other levels, I would prefer 2 other subclasses and their features compared to the Eldritch Knight. Also, if you take a wizard, you have a spellbook so you can get more spells, or if you take a preparation spellcaster like a druid or a cleric, you just have access to all their 1st level spells. I really wish the Eldritch Knight would get a complete overhaul. However, spellcasting with a fighter is still powerful, and at later levels when you get access to more spells, eventually the Eldritch Knight still begins to hold its own. And just because I don't understand why you would choose an Eldritch Knight isn't me saying that it isn't decent. So I'm putting it bottom of B, borderline C tier. But honestly guys, if you are in a game that allows multiclassing, you can do better with a fighter subclass. Next up we have the Psi Warrior, and this is 5th edition's Jedi. And the more I play and see this subclass in action, the more I absolutely adore it, to an almost irrational degree. The psionic dice you gain go a long way, and you have the option to replenish 1 on a short rest, but honestly you won't really be needing that. Your dice go a long way. I think the number of psionic dice you are given is more than fair. And also we have to look at the Psi Warrior's incredible early features, which are a perfect mix of offensive, defensive, and utility features. The Psi Warrior is just so flexible and versatile. And I'm not just talking about party fit, the role that the Psi Warrior plays in any given party, but also in campaign type. The Psi Warrior holds its own in a tactical game, a role-playing, focused linear story, a mystery, or anything else. Really, there is not a campaign where I would not feel completely comfortable playing a Psi Warrior in, and I think that is the hallmark of a great subclass. It is so good. This is what I think fighter subclasses should try to emulate. This level of power, this mix of offensive, defensive, and utility features, and this limitless role-playing potential that this subclass provides. From the DMing side of things though, I think they're also great. Strong, but not overpowered. Interesting mechanics and loaded with backstory potential. I always look forward to seeing a Psi Warrior in my games. This is my kind of subclass through and through. More of this please, Wizards of the Coast. This is top of S, certainly. Next up, we have the Purple Dragon Knight, otherwise known as the Banneret. I like saying Purple Dragon Knight, so don't hate on me. TLDR from the main video, I think that the Purple Dragon Knight isn't that bad. Is it weaker than almost every other fighter subclass? Absolutely, I don't think there's really a debate there. But a feature like Rallying Cry isn't a terrible subclass ability by any means. Especially if your DM rules that your Rallying Cry can pick up an unconscious party member. And if you're talking about how can an unconscious person hear, alarm clock. The Rallying Cry feature is a combat alarm clock that wakes you up. And honestly, the whole subclass how it's written is a little bit jank, but I still think it's better than the champion fighter. At 7th level, getting expertise in persuasion as a fighter gives you a defined party niche. I also find a lot of fun sharing my core fighter class features with my party members. And again, you might think it's boring, but as someone who likes playing support, the Purple Dragon Knight scratches that support itch very well. What you find boring, another player might be looking for. However, I did release an updated version of the Purple Dragon Knight that you can download for free on my website. It's been play tested for hundreds of hours and has taken 2 Purple Dragon Knights from levels 3 to level 20. So it might have actually been play tested more than the original Purple Dragon Knight. But I like it, I've been getting a lot of good feedback from you commenters about it. So check it out if you want a modern, updated version of the Purple Dragon Knight. Where would I put my version of the Purple Dragon Knight? It's probably B tier. Ahead of the Eldritch Knight, but it's not leapfrogging over the Rune Knight. The current Purple Dragon Knight though, I think it's top of C tier. It has solid support abilities, a defined party role, and I think it is definitively better than the champion fighter. So I'm pretty confident putting the Purple Dragon Knight right there in C tier. It's definitely not D, not even close to as bad as the Arcane Archer. God, me and my players all hate that subclass. Alright, here's the big one. Rune Knight. I want to preface this by saying I really like the Rune Knight, but not as much as some. I gave this subclass a 20 out of 20 when it came to out of combat utility. I think the Rune Knight is really good. The wide variety of runes you get really sets this subclass apart. It also has incredibly robust defensive features, like Runic Shield and the Hill Giant rune, which keep this titan going in combat. Growing to larger sizes and getting more damage is also great and an incredibly fun and thematic ability. Who doesn't want to grow to 12 feet tall and crush a goblin under their foot? It's just a hell of a lot of fun. However, in my Rune Knight video, there were a lot of commenters talking about oversized weapons with the Rune Knight. For those that do not know, an oversized weapon, so like a size large greatsword, does an additional die of damage. At first glance, this seems really good with the Rune Knight, because with Giant Might and an oversized greatsword, you're doing 4d6 plus your strength modifier in damage. No other fighter subclass can sustain that level of damage. Sure, you have subclasses with higher peaks, but the Rune Knight itself? Yeah, when it's cooking on all cylinders with an oversized weapon, it is brutal in combat. However, you make attacks with this weapon at disadvantage unless you're that size. A Rune Knight, because you can become size large, can use an oversized weapon without that disadvantage. But I'm here to tell you from experience that in most games, this isn't practical, or I should say this is completely DM dependent. And it's not something that I'm actively factoring in when I'm ranking the Rune Knight. First, you need to find an oversized weapon, because there's no way to start with one unless your DM gives you an oversized weapon. Then, if you find an oversized weapon, you have to lug it around. For context, the average greatsword is 5 feet long. A large weapon is double in size. You're hauling around a 10-foot long sword. That hunk of steel isn't going to be easy to carry around. Guts, from Berserk, who is known for wielding a monster sword, has a blade that is about 7 feet long. Look, if I'm your DM, you're not sneaking anywhere with that weapon. Also, as soon as you're walking down the street or entering a tavern or a room, everybody is looking at you because you're the guy carrying around a 10-foot long sword. This is a problem because Giant Might doesn't make your weapons grow. The ability says anything you're wearing. This signifies armor or magical items that you are actually wearing. You are wearing a sheath, you don't wear a sword. Rules as written and rules as intended, your weapons are not growing with you. So you're gonna have to carry around that oversized weapon, and it's too big to be stowed in something like a bag of holding, by the way. So yeah, we're beginning to run into a problem, and also, you only have 2 uses of your Giant Might at 3rd level. What happens if you run out of uses? That sword is going to be useless. At later levels, you're never going to run out of Giant Might, but I focus on early levels where you will spend most, if not all of your time when you're playing a D&D character. And Rune Knights run out of their Giant Might at early levels. Finally, and this is, I think, the most important part, you gotta get that weapon some magic at some point. Because at 5th level, not having a magic weapon is going to cripple your fighter. Therefore, your DM either has to give you a magic oversized weapon, or allow you to have one enchanted, or you rely on another party member to cast something like magic weapon on your sword. Do you see how inconsistent this is? I hope you do. Yes, if everything works, the Rune Knight is A tier. Fantastic single target damage. But I'm not comfortable assuming that you're gonna get an oversized weapon. It's too DM and campaign dependent. Another thing slightly holding the Rune Knight back is its lack of known runes. Some runes, while powerful, are also situational. Really, I think the Rune Knight would benefit from just knowing all its runes and having a certain number of runes it can apply. Otherwise though, incredibly strong and solid subclass, high B, if not low A. Next up though, we have the Samurai, and I hate that this subclass is called Samurai because it's really a noble warrior, but whatever. The Samurai breaks the action economy while also providing great out-of-combat utility. This is a super underrated subclass that I talk about in greater depth in my Samurai video. However, know that pairing Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter with this subclass is a lethal combination. Years ago, I read how mathematically advantage and disadvantage work their way out to being a +5 or a -5 to a roll. The Samurai, being able to provide automatic advantage, takes away any downside of using Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter. Easily, you can be doing 20 damage a turn at 3rd level. But honestly, damage and multi-classing potential are secondary in my opinion when we're talking about the Samurai. It has fantastic defensive capabilities, but also the Samurai is great outside of combat with its bonus proficiency and elegant courtier features. This is an underrated fighter subclass that, like the Cavalier, I think are not played more because of the name. If a Samurai was named something different other than a Samurai, more people would play it. Otherwise though, this subclass is definitely A tier. But really, I think that the Samurai, the Cavalier, and the Rune Knight are all kind of interchangeable depending on what your preference is and your DM and the campaign that you're in. Each one shines in different ways, and I think all of them are on about the same level of power. Alright though, we finally made it to Mercer's monster. And hold on, let me just expand the list for a second, and there we go. The Echo Knight is in a tier all its own. It is the undisputed king of fighters. Look, if you don't think this subclass is absolutely stupidly powerful, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Also, yes, I know about the Ghost Lance. I know about the Echo Guardian. I know about all the multi-classes that come with an Echo Knight. That's why I said in my Echo Knight video that you can multi-class an Echo Knight with any other class, and it's gonna be great. The core subclass is just so powerful that it really doesn't matter at a certain point. Warlock, Cleric, Barbarian, Druid, Paladin, they all slap with the Echo Knight. And another thing that I forgot to mention in that video is that the Echo Knight's 10th level Shadow Martyr ability can be used to swap any ally's place with an Echo when they're about to take damage. Not just you, although most Echo Knights just use it on themselves, but your Shadow Martyr ability can be used to save the squishy wizard from the Dragon's Breath weapon. So that's just added utility in and outside of combat. But for all my ranting about how powerful the Echo Knight is, would I change it? No. It is an extremely fun subclass to play, and in my opinion, to DM for. I love seeing the interesting and novel ways that an Echo Knight can use their Echo abilities. Plus, the damage of an Echo Knight isn't game-breaking. It's very good, but I'm not shaking in my boots when an Echo uses Unleash Incarnation to take an additional attack. The Echo Knight sets itself apart due to the sheer utility it provides. Only the Rune Knight can contest the Echo Knight in terms of utility, but by later levels, the Echo Knight outscales even the Rune Knight. An Echo Knight, more than perhaps any other fighter, has the tools to circumvent challenges that DMs provide for them. They can fundamentally warp reality that only a few other fighter subclasses can even get close to. I'm talking about subclasses like the Psi Warrior or the Eldritch Knight at higher levels. But any build, any multiclass, any race, any DM, it doesn't matter, the Echo Knight still shines. There's nothing that this subclass, in my opinion, can't do. And you know, I'm okay with the power level it's at. If you're in a group and feel like the martial caster divide is massive, just play an Echo Knight. You're gonna be competitive at every level. But this is my fighter tier list. It is completely objective, and if you disagree with me, you're completely wrong. There is absolutely nothing to debate about this tier list. Of course though, like always, this video was based on my subjective experiences playing and running for these subclasses, as well as my analysis of their subclass features. What is most important though is that you find a subclass that you love. That is 1000% the most important thing. I can recognize that the Purple Dragon Knight is not a great subclass. It is underpowered compared to pretty much every other subclass. But I have a lot of fun playing the subclass, and that's what's most important. If you like playing Arcane Archers, go for it. If you like playing Rune Knights and think they're the best thing ever, more power to you. The variety that's there, I think, is the most important factor. Now, if you want to learn how to play the basic fighter class, check out this video right here, or check out this playlist of all the fighter subclasses I've done so far. And thank you for entering the dungeon.